Hi, so patch 7.35 came out, bit unexpected. Well, it's always expected and wasn't expected. We don't need to go into that. It came out without very much warning, and notwithstanding the features of it, which I think are largely positive, the implementation has been nothing short of a disaster. In fact, I can't remember the last time there was such a badly implemented patch. It was almost like on the Wednesday night, which is the reset night for EU. We already knew that there was something hadn't gone exactly according to plan, because North America, which gets their reset on Tuesday, first of all, the maintenance was massive. Now, okay, that sort of thing can happen, especially with a patch of this nature. It's not just new content coming in. Systems have been fundamentally changed. We sort of knew that. We didn't necessarily know to what extent. But it's almost like a bit of a joke on the first night. Okay, we can't really raid properly. It's very slow going. It's a bit like, oh, this is a bit like patch night in Classic WoW, Vanilla WoW. Wasn't quite such a laugh the next night when, I talked about a fix for the FPS issues in raids in particular. And that's actually really interesting because I didn't really notice any massive problems until I got into the raid. And then for me, it was unplayable. You do the usual things. We turned graphics settings down to next to nothing, even though I've got a very good quality computer, very good quality graphics card. Shouldn't have been an issue. And in fact, it made no difference at all because I can run the game at very high settings and it runs just as well at very low settings. So why would you use low settings? But you do it anyway. I disabled all add-ons that have got nothing to do with raiding, including the damage meters, all that sort of went. You do everything you can to minimize the load on the computer from my end. And it still made no difference. It was completely unplayable. And then a fix was suggested, which I sort of communicated in my last video. With the sacrifice was you play without sound, which improved it. It still wasn't as it should be, but it did improve it. It became playable for easy farm content. Then when it came to the more difficult farm content, which we were doing yesterday with the guild, it was unplayable for me. Even with that fix, I tried, some people were saying that actually they'd been in LFR earlier, which raid environment, and it was okay. So I sort of tried that, and it wasn't working well. So I went back to the no sound thing, and then that still didn't even work very well for me. So I had to sort of absent myself, put myself on the bench to say, sorry guys, I can't actually play like this on anything other than an easy farm boss. But other people were having struggles as well, and the raid eventually had to call it without actually killing any more bosses yesterday. I actually used the time to go into LFR with my shaman. And actually that was okay as well. It wasn't brilliant, but it was okay. It was really weird how it's okay in LFR and it's not okay in a heroic or mythic raid. In the same raid, Antorus, Burning Throne. I can't really work that one out. And then I started to think, well, here's the issue. They're talking about changing game systems, and it's been on the PTR, of course. The latest build wasn't on the PTR for more than a few days before they put it live, which seemed a little bit strange. I said that as last week. But on a situation like that, you can't really test everything as you would want to on the PTR. And with having the FPS loss in the raid sort of meant a little bit of sense in a way in my non-technical mind, because I'm thinking to myself, well, what's a few things that just doesn't get tested on PTR? Well, current raids. If there's an upcoming raid being tested on the PTR, of course, some people will try that out. Not necessarily in massive numbers, but a fair few will. But when it comes to current raids, well, people aren't really going to try that out. So there's certain types of content people are going to test on a PTR, and there's certain types of content they're just not. And for some things as well, you're just not going to get the same load as you will on live servers when a patch goes live on the PTR. So sure, there'll be some things that have been checked. And there has been a bit of a phrase bandied about, which is a phrase that I use to my students, which is that normally you shouldn't be worried about failure because you learn from failure. Failure is the greatest teacher. There's any number of very wise people over the ages have said the exact same thing. But there's a difference. It's a bit like I will say to my students, with a couple of analogies. If, as I've been doing this week, I've been doing enthalpy calculations with my students, and they try it out and they get it a bit wrong. That's okay. I tell them not to worry about it. You're going to try it again. You're going to get better. And eventually, when you've done enough practice, you'll be really good at it and you'll be set for when we do it for real, which they were. That sort of failure is good because you're learning something. Then if I say to a student, right, you've got a deadline here. You've got to hand in this assignment by this deadline, and they miss that deadline. That's not a acceptable form of failure, because then that's not something from which they learn. They knew in the first place they had to meet that. The same sort of thing you can link very much World of Warcraft. Let's say raiding. Someone on a fight, they know that standing in something is actually quite bad, but they also know there's a tight DPS check. If they can withstand the damage, they can do more damage, they can push the phase, it's to the betterment of the entire raid if several people can do that. So you test yourself out, you stand in the fire effectively, see if the healers can cope, see if you can survive. If you can, great, you've learnt something, that means you can do a bit more DPS in that part of the fight. If you can't, then again you've still learnt something, you know not to do it. That's the good part of failure. But if the reason you're standing in this fire time after time after time is just because, oh, I forgot to move out, that's not good failure. That's not learning anything. You already knew it was bad to stand in the fire. If you did it a first time because you were absent-minded, you should have put something in place to make sure that next time it didn't happen. Maybe put an alert, use your boss mod, something like that. So now we link it to this. Here we've got a situation where they're changing things about the systems much more severely than we might be aware of. There's various bits of information been leaking out. I'm not going to go into detail in it, but they've been making massive changes to the system that have got nothing to do with anything that would be obvious or anything that's in the patch notes. And it's gone badly wrong as you can imagine. So badly wrong that there's going to be a second massive maintenance this week, and that may not fix it. We all hope and pray it will, but it may not. In such a situation like this, you need an exit plan. You know you're going to be doing something that could potentially go wrong. Why was there no exit plan? Because that is not an acceptable form of failure. It's no good just saying, look, if Blizzard never tried anything dodgy out, we'd never have the fantastic features it has. That is sort of true to a point, but you also need to know, if this goes wrong, what can we do about it? If the answer is, well, nothing, then you go, okay, we're going to delay the launch by a week, make sure we can do something. They didn't have to bring it out this week. They didn't have to, they hadn't even announced it. If they'd have said this month, instead of saying this Monday, oh, by the way, the patch is coming out this week, tomorrow, if they'd have said, it's coming out next week, oh, that's fine. We'd have wondered what all that casting of those guys on the Broken Shore was about, but we'd have been okay with that. But no, they've rushed it out, and it's collapsibly gone wrong. And I don't know if it's a work culture thing, because I'm starting to think, obviously, I don't know what the work culture is at Blizzard. And I'm going to go on record, let's just point this out. When I talk about Blizzard here, the vast majority of people working at Blizzard are absolutely fantastic. They've got the right attitude, they've got the right desire to bring us a fantastic game. And for once, I'm not even complaining about developers here. This is not a developer issue, this is an engineering issue. And I don't want to take pot shots at even the engineers here, but there's something wrong, I feel, with the culture if there's no exit plan here. I've worked in workplaces before where there was a disproportionate amount of influence held by a small minority of imbeciles. In other words, you've got people who want an idea pushed forward. Oh, I've got this fantastic idea. And if you try saying to them, all right, great, but actually, have you thought about these consequences, which could actually be pretty bad? They'll look at you and they'll say, why are you being so negative? Why are you bringing us down? We'll never achieve anything being negative like that. It's not being negative. It's devil's advocate. What you're saying is, okay, great, let's do this. But actually, these are the consequences. We need to make sure that these are covered in case it goes wrong. The problem is when you get defensive about that, or you label people as negative when they criticise it, you will always fail, because you will never learn, because you never accept that you need that exit strategy. And you don't use an exit strategy to hold you back, by the way. You don't use it to stop you innovating. You don't want to be too afraid of innovating, of course not. But you need to realise when you're about to do something that can cause dreadful damage. Now, at the moment where we are is the game is, for some aspects of the game, not all, of course. I mean, I can go out and do the solo stuff, that's okay. Some aspects of the game are largely unplayable. There's been an awful lot of bugs with relating to content and players, and there's lots and lots of things beyond the FPS issues in raids that have been wrong with this, some of which they've been doing. They have been putting out fires. It could be argued that there's a massive number of them. There shouldn't be this many either, but they've been working on that. But the big thing is this. And how does this link to Battle for Azeroth? My thinking straight away with this was, oh, hang on a minute. At the moment, what we were expecting is patch this week, next week announcement or actual opening of the Battle for Azeroth Alpha / Beta, whatever it's going to be called. First wave of people get in, blah, 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 start to learn more about it. Is that going to be put off? How would it affect Battle for Azeroth, you ask? Well, here's the thing. The systems that they have been updating and changing in patch 7.3.5 are not really for the purposes of Legion content. They're for Battle for Azeroth content that they want to get in because it's ready. Remember at BlizzCon, they announced all these features coming that are really associated with Battle for Azeroth. But, and this was the great hype, we were going to be getting them early. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, if they've gone wrong live, well, that means, what if some of the features that they've tried to change, they can't fix? Because until they're fixed, we don't know they can fix them. What if they can't fix them? How does that impact on the state of Battle for Azeroth as it exists now? Because although we don't see the testing, it's not open, there are people testing it. It exists in, you know, in not quite finished state, but it exists. Battle for Azeroth, when they said anything about the release date, they said they aim to get it out by the end of 2018. That doesn't mean to say they guarantee to get it out, or even that it's likely. They just aim to. That is like optimistic appraisal. We maybe could get this out by the end of 2018. Anything at all that's going to cause them to have to rethink essential system elements of Battle for Azeroth are going to put it back. Not just to the point where it had come out in 2019, but maybe well into 2019. This is a very realistic scenario if that's the case. So then we turn our attention to 2018 with the live game. Nothing has yet been announced for content. Now, at the moment, we don't need anything. It's all ticking along. It's great. We're fantastic with what we've got. If the game works, the servers will just work. But what happens by Easter? By Easter, we're going to need a substantial amount of new content to keep up with the pace that Legion has given us. If that isn't forthcoming, and they haven't said anything yet. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely expect them to say something about content that's still to come. I know they've said no more raid tiers. That doesn't preclude any other type of content that can potentially come. So I fully expect there to be content to take us from Easter through summer. And I was fully expecting that maybe after summer, that is the real lead into Battle for Azeroth, at which point, you know, all they have to do is bring out the content that's related to getting us ready for Battle for Azeroth, you know, the pre-expansion patch and so on. We don't need anything massive there. There's no point in bringing out anything substantial then because there's not enough time to really get through it before the expansion comes out anyway. A few months of not anything massively new is okay. We're okay. We're not going to call that a content drought. I'm certainly not. But if Battle for Azeroth ends up getting pushed well into 2019, all of a sudden you're looking at a content drought again, what can be called a content drought. And as I've said time and time again, Blizzard basically, it might be a bit extreme to say staked their reputation, but as far as World of Warcraft did, they staked the reputation of the current development team, which is very different to development team of former years. They've basically staked their reputation on getting Legion right. They abandoned Warlords of Draenor because they weren't able to deliver on what they were going to do. They realised that if they even tried to polish the turd of Warlords of Draenor, they would also potentially be sacrificing Legion instead. They cut their losses. It was a complete disaster from most points of view. I mean, I loved it, don't get me wrong, because, you know, raiding is what I do. There was good raiding in it. That was fine. But for a lot of other people, it was not fine. And they cut their losses on that to make sure that Legion succeeded. And so far, although we can complain about some things, we have to agree that they have kept their promise in terms of meaningful content on a regular basis. And it's been varied and fantastic work on that. That is all going to go down the toilet. They're going to piss that away if we end up with another proper content drought, because they will never be believed again. There's already people who don't believe that there won't be before even this patch happened. But the other ones, the optimists, are not going to believe it, because if they couldn't get it right in Legion, when they've really staked their reputation on being able to manage a complex production like World of Warcraft, it's basically, you do not know what you're doing. The people in charge, the people overseeing it, never mind collective effort here. Of course it's a collective effort, but there are people in charge of departments. And those people in charge of departments, if that happens, if there is a content drought at the end of Legion of a significant period of time, if Battle for Azeroth gets pushed back for a significant amount of time, that basically says that those people are not capable of managing a project of this magnitude. They've worked their way up the ranks because they were good at their jobs in isolation, small teams, and they were promoted because of that. But some of those people, at least, not all, but some of those will have shown themselves to be incapable of managing their jobs. And it's as simple as that. And it could cost the reputation of a whole group of people who are actually doing their jobs really well. And that's pretty grim. Now, I hope that that's alarmist and that's not what's going to happen. I hope that when the maintenance happens and I get up tomorrow, fortunately the maintenance is due to end. I know a long maintenance never finishes when it's due to end. But by the time I haul my ass out of bed at a weekend, it should be up, and I'm hoping... I won't be able to see if actually it's really improved. I mean, I suppose the big thing will be, can we do Mythic Plus dungeons? Because at the moment that's a bit dodgy. One of my killed in Arquay. Spiders didn't spawn. Which meant the spider boss didn't spawn. It's like, oh, right, that's that dungeon knackered then. And there's been many other problems as well. If those are at least fixed, we can probably test out the weekend. I won't be able to test whether I can raid sensibly until Sunday evening. But I'm hoping reports from people who can will come through going, do you know what, they've fixed it. In which case that might also mean there are no long-term problems with this. I hope that's the case. I don't necessarily believe that's the case. But, you know, it's a matter of 24 hours to wait for that one. But that is my great fear. And I'd be very interested to see if... Because I was thinking that for next week, whether the alpha stroke beta is announced or not, I don't know. But I was certainly expecting them to do a live Q&A. Now, whether that live... But it hasn't been officially announced, of course. Whether that live Q&A goes ahead and whether they are publicly candid about what has actually happened, I don't know. If they are, it will suggest that they do know what to do about it. If they're not, generally speaking, they can be quite candid about problems where they think they know what to do about it and it won't happen again. Sometimes it does happen again. And where they are not sure what to do about it, they're less likely to be candid about the reasons. And so yeah, this has the potential to have far-reaching effects, and it's so crucial that they do get Legion right. And to get Legion right, doesn't matter what came before it, the finish has got to be good. It's got to be managed well. And I just think that's in danger now, because it's not a piece of content that's gone bad. It's not like Tomb of Sargeras, where there was a bit of a cock-up in terms of the balancing of the bosses or the mechanics of those bosses. This is the game system itself, their vision for the future of the game. And their vision for the future of the game is always the following expansion. Those are the systems that have been implemented nice and early. Those are the ones that they need to work. And if they don't work, and they can't get them to work, as I've already said, that means a re-evaluation of their Battle for Azeroth strategy. And that is going to push things back. Or cause them to have to drop things that they'd planned to do. And we know from past experience what that means. So I really hope that's not the case. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, even if you've not enjoyed what I've had to say, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if it's the first time to my channel. I'll be streaming tomorrow afternoon, depending on when you watch this, Saturday afternoon. We can have a talk about it then. And until next time, I'll see you later.